I've met, I don't know if you know his backstory, but Ankush came, I'm sure he'll tell you more himself, but he came in as a student in this workshop, how many years ago?
2012.
2012.
Oh, wow.
And from there on, he'd already been doing a lot of self-development work, and he moved on to other things, and I'll let him give you the details. But it wasn't long before he came back as a coach, and I told him this last year that his talks are the ones that I always make sure I catch. All the other guys are great and all that, but firstly, I love the stuff that he teaches because, well, I teach a lot of the same stuff, but he's always so eloquent in explaining it. And so I always do my best to catch his talk. In fact, I should be at home coaching right now, but I needed to catch at least a little bit of it, which is why I came. So I strongly recommend you listen and you take the notes and you ask the questions, because what he has to share is such a fundamental thing that when you get this, everything else becomes easy. If you don't get this, then you need to keep working to get it, because it's going to change everything and it's going to make all the stuff that we cover this week a lot easier to grok and catch. So just want to give him that quick presentation. I'll slink off to the back and let him do the rest. And thanks for being here.
Thanks, TJ.
Right. We've got a really small group this year, which is excellent, because it means that you guys get lots of attention and we've got a lot of time today. So I'm going to be speaking today for about 2 to 3 hours, depending on how we go. And then I'll also be speaking tomorrow morning as well, and I'll be doing some live coaching with you guys. And again, normally we have a much bigger group, and so not everyone gets a chance to do it, but I think this year we'll have everyone get coached. So I thought what would be good is if we start off with I want to make this talk as relevant to you guys as possible. So you guys have come from a long way away to be here, spend the week over here. So I thought what would be good is, I know you did a little bit of introductions with TJ, I was kind of at the back and listened to a bit of it, but what would be really useful is to start off with, what would you love to get from this week? Like, what would make it really, really, really worthwhile? And I will make sure that I try and make this talk as relevant as possible. So start off with you, Steve.
Really just like identifying blind spots that I have in regards to dating, relationships, and also business too, because I think they're all related. And so I could really just be firing all cylinders.
So blind spots, dating, relationships, and business. Okay. And what does firing on all cylinders mean to you?
Really just like going for what I want and not letting any internal or external resistance stop me.
And does that happen a lot at the moment?
In terms of business, I feel kind of stuck in terms of what direction to go in next. And it's just been kind of stagnant for the past year. Still good. But I'd like to just keep growing a lot more.
Okay, cool. So we can definitely work with that. How about you, Vij, right? Vic. What about you?
It's very interesting. So lately I've been exploring the concept of staying in my body, staying grounded. A lot of people are in the heart, the head. And I'm trying to stay in the body. And there are so many times when I'm interacting with somebody and I lose touch of that, of being in my body, staying present. What do I want? So, I would like that.
Staying more present and grounded.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
Johnny mentioned yesterday that I created a lot of self-doubt. I want to overcome that. Yeah, I think those would be the two big things.
Okay, cool. That's exactly what I do, so that's very helpful. How about you, TJ? Is there anything you'd like to get from from this talk?
I'll leave in about an hour, but I'd say for me, the most interesting thing, and the thing I always watch and pay attention to when I listen to you or Jamie speak, is I tend to get very eager when I'm coaching, when I'm speaking to people about stuff that matters to me. When I get too eager, I forget to listen. I get into teaching mode rather than coaching mode, which is one of the reasons I love watching your demonstrations, because you demonstrate that just so masterfully. So I'd say that's another one thing I'd like to learn more about from you.
Okay.
You're really building on the expectations.
Well, you can handle it, so it's fine.
It's all right. How about you, Elizabeth? Is there anything you'd like to get? How about you, Annie?
I think for me, it's more like a refresher course with you. So I've worked with you in the past and had a one-to-one with Jamie with you as well. So it's just actually sort of touching back into that zone, which can, with my routine or whatever's going on with me, can easily fall away, and I will get in my head again, and it becomes very emotional. So then I feel like I'm at a roadblock. So I'm not moving forwards. It's just I'm just routine, and it's coming back to some of these teachings and way to actually ground yourself, get back in touch with who you are, and then move forwards.
Okay. So I've put for you getting out of clarity. So that's where you're at now, and you want to get back to grounding and clarity. Yeah? All right. So I'll just leave that there. And you cannot leave this room until we get all of them done. I'm joking. So we'll cover this, and the good thing is I'm talking tomorrow morning as well, and we'll do some one-on-one coaching. So we should be able to cover all of that. I'm setting high expectations for myself there, but we should. And also the great thing is as well about this group, and I love coming to Vegas and I love helping Johnny out, is that I'm available afterwards as well. So this is not a case of you have access to me for 2 sessions and then you're dead to me. If there's something that intrigues you, if there's something you want to know more, if you don't understand, I'm happy to explain that and talk afterwards. Very happy to do that. So I'll leave that there, and I thought what I'll start with a little bit about my story, my background, because I think it's really helpful. And so apologies to you guys, because you've probably heard this before, but I think it's a useful place to through a whole host of personal stuff, which was really helpful and helped me to grow at the time, maybe not so, but gone through bullying and being picked on and all that sort of usual stuff. And I got to university, thinking this is a real great start. And so I got there and I had all these friends. I even remember on my birthday in my first year of university, I think I had 60 people turn up, which was very unusual. And it wasn't like we went to some great party. I mean, we literally went to a restaurant, Nando's, and we went bowling, and we just took over the place. And yet nobody wanted to date me, at least nobody that I really liked. And so a friend of mine said, hey, I see you really struggling, you should check out this website. And it was a very early seduction community website, which was very manipulative, and I didn't resonate with most of it. But there were 1 or 2 things that stuck out to me. So one of them was eye contact. And if you'd see me at university, I used to walk through university and around like this, because I had no confidence to even look the world in the eyes. It was that scary to me. And so I took that from this website and I thought, well, I can do that. That's not manipulative. I can try and stare at people, or not stare at people, but at least look up. And I remember walking through university and there was a pretty girl walking towards me. And my immediate thought was, look at the ground, this is scary. But I stayed looking, and it was so out of my comfort zone. But she kept looking at me, I kept looking at her. She smiled, I smiled back. Now, nothing happened, but just that was a miracle to me, that could happen. And so I kind of got hooked onto, wow, things can be different. And so I spent the next few years just reading stuff online, learning stuff, surface level stuff, which seemed to help. And then when I graduated from university, that's when the book The Game came out, as many people may have read. And I was like, oh my God, it's not just me, there's lots of other people. And so I started going out and meeting guys who really didn't have a clue, right, with women. And so we were all clueless, but we were going out regularly, and I'd go out every week and, fail with women. But as Johnny talks about, you learn from your failures. There's no such thing as failure, there's just successes. And so I did that for years and years and years. And I learned lots of things. I had an image consultation from a guy from New York. I had elocution lessons to speak more eloquently. I did Alexander technique for my posture. You name it, anything I could do to improve myself, I did. And what happened was I had a couple of very serious relationships where I was ready to marry the girl. And I thought, I've done all this game, and now I'm going to marry. One girl in particular I bought a ring for. 2 days after I bought the ring, she dumped me. A year later, I met someone else, and I thought, this is the one. On paper, she was perfect for me. And 9 months later, she dumped me, and she didn't even call me to dump me, right? So she went on holiday. We said, all right, we'll talk when you come back. She came back. 3 or 4 days in a row, she didn't call me, and I'm calling her. She ignored my calls. I text her nothing. Eventually, I call her from a withheld number. I had to force her to dump me, right? And so I was in a low place, and I was like, I've done 10 years of learning, and I know more about women than anyone. Why the isn't this working? And so, but I didn't give up. I stayed with it. I thought, right, there's something for me to learn here. And I met someone who's going to be here later this week, Zan Perion. So I met Zan, and that was really helpful and tied a lot of things together for me. And then Zan introduced me to Johnny. So that was 2012, and I met Johnny, and that kind of was like Johnny taking a can opener to my head and stirring it all together, but was incredibly helpful. But then all of that learning led me to, in 2012, thinking, I want to help other guys. I want to coach. And I worked with a gentleman called Jamie Smart, who kind of introduced me to how the mind works. And the change I had from that was more than everything else put together. And that's saying something, considering how much personal development work I'd done up until that point. So when I came to Successfulness, I wasn't, new, if you like. And Johnny will always make fun of me because I said to him, I'm not a novice. And Johnny said to me, just come, you won't be that far behind everyone else. So I'll tell the joke before he does, all right? And I got so much from it. But it was amazing what changed for me when I really understood how the mind works. And I guess what I do is deep inner work with people, really deep inner work. And the changes in me, as TJ can attest to, and Lynn, if you ask her, it has been, and Annie, has just been phenomenal. And so I'm really a testament that I don't think I'm being mean to myself, if the guy that came here in 2012 could turn into me, then it really is possible for anyone. It really is. And I'm going to share a bunch of things with you guys to show that it's possible for you. I'm not a unique case. I'm not someone, this is happening to Ankush, but that's because he's Ankush. That won't happen to me, right? It's possible for everyone. And I've been working now for 6.5 years as a coach, and I work a lot with men. And the changes, and many of them have been people who've been here at some point, have just been remarkable. And if anyone's interested, I can tell some of those stories later. So what is it that is this deep? Has anyone got any questions so far on that piece? Okay. So what is it that I'm helping clients with? What is it that I point to? And the fundamental thing that I point to is the principles behind our psychology, right? So this is something that Johnny shares a lot of stuff with us that we go, oh yeah, I didn't realize that, but it's true. Well, here's something that I didn't realize that you might not have realized. In psychology, there is no fundamental agreement amongst all psychologists, right? There are a bunch of different theories, but there is no fundamental agreement around how the mind works. We are in what's called a pre-paradigm phase in this, if you want to call it a science. So if you look at chemistry, everyone agrees that the periodic table is the table of elements. We all agree with that. If you go to physics, everybody agrees about Newton's laws. There are theories, but there are real fundamental things that every physicist agrees on. And you can look at every hard science and you'll see the same thing. In psychology, that's not the case. In psychology, you have some people say, well, everyone learns things from their childhood. You have other people that say, well, actually, it's more genetics. You have other people saying, well, this is important. And, you have all these different theories. And there was a guy called William James about 150, 200 years ago. And he's known as the father of psychology or the grandfather of psychology. And he said, if we discover the fundamental principles behind our psychology, it will be the greatest discovery since fire. And what I've been introduced to is, I believe, the principles behind our psychology. What is universal for Vic and Steve and Unnie and TJ and Elizabeth and Kayla? What is true for all of us? Because if you can understand that, as opposed to, well, what's my particular neurosis, right? What's my particular flavor of fucked up? Well, you can just keep analyzing that for years, and people do. You will see people who go to therapists for 10 years, and they're pretty much at the same place they were 10 years earlier, right? Not all therapists, but generally, there's often little progress. But if we understand what is fundamentally true for all of us, then that's a real game changer, because it goes beyond your particular neuroses, right? So I'm going to share. I always give out little gifts, and they're at the back of the room. I think Unnie's going to go and grab them in a second, right? So I read a book a year ago after I was in Vegas last, and this book is called The Story of You. And I really like it because it's not exactly what I talk about, but it really dovetails nicely. And this book is by a colleague of mine, someone who I have done workshops with, and it's yours to keep. It's a little gift from me. It's not published anymore, so some of them have got writing in and things like that, because I had to buy them secondhand because you can't get hold of them anymore.
I like that.
Yeah. I'll keep this for the other gentleman. So this book is a gift for everyone. And really what it points to is that you've all got a story. So if we sat down and we asked you, Steve, what's your story? Sometimes people ask that question, what's your story? And we'll come out with a whole load of stuff. And right now, all of you believe something true about yourselves. I'm an extrovert, I'm an introvert, I'm driven, I'm lazy, right? I'm this, I'm that. And we all believe that our stories, or a lot of people will say that our stories stemmed from childhood, right? Or when I was a kid, I was really like this. And Steve has a great saying. He said, most people never graduate from high school, right? Mentally. Most people mentally will develop until they get to high school age, and then they stay at that level. They believe their story is fixed up until that point. But that's not true, right? Because what is your story made of? Can anyone answer that question?
It's really just like a sequence of events and interpretation of those events.
Right.
In sequence, like this happened and it means this, and that changed me in this way, which led to this. It's like a linear cause and effect.
Right. So can I point something out there?
Yeah.
The really important piece of what you just said was the interpretation of those events. So it's not the events, right. It's the interpretation of the events. So someone might say, well, I had a really tough father, that's why I have no confidence, because he was always belittling me. But if that person had, say, 2 siblings, another sibling could say, well, you know what? I'm really successful because I had a tough father. Someone else might say, yeah, my dad was just my dad. Had nothing to do with how I am today. So it's always about the interpretation of events as opposed to the events themselves. Because you can get any two people go through the same event and they will interpret it totally differently. Do you guys see that, or I'm happy to be challenged?
Yeah, there's this thing, and there's these twins, and they grow up with the same dad. Same story. And one was just like a wasted guy who just licked nothing. And then his brother, twin, was the most successful guy in the whole entire world. And then they got asked, why are you the way that you are? Oh, it's because of my dad. Why are the way that you are? It's because of my dad. Like, okay, so one's successful and one's completely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, is it people?
Well, it's a misunderstanding, right? That's what I'm pointing to. So stuff happens to all of us, and we interpret that, and we think the interpretation is telling us about what happened. So the one twin who had a difficult dad interpreted that as exactly. So it can't be the dad. It can't be the dad. Well, it's their thinking. It's their interpretation, right? So we've all got a story, we've all got beliefs, we've all got interpretations. And if you boil that down, I'm going to use a word for that, thought. It's just, that's what it is, it's thought. If you don't think about your dad or your upbringing or whatever, you have no story. So when you see your stories, I'm confident, I'm shy, I'm driven, I'm worthless, I'm amazing. When you realize that's all made of thought, right? Let me play something back to you. Let me ask you another question. What is thought made of?
The voice in the head.
What about you?
I don't know really what thought is.
What's it made of?
I mean, like within your own brain, it's really just like a series of pictures and sounds. And
Right. But what's it made of?
I don't know.
Right? How much do your thoughts weigh?
Oh,
Nothing.
Right? How big are they?
You don't have any physical existence.
Right. They are made of nothing. Where do they come from?
The brain.
Nowhere.
experience?
Well, we think they come from experience, but they don't, because we can have thoughts that we've never had before. Because if you're a kid, imagine you're a small child, imagine you're 2, 3 years old, right? You're going to constantly have new thoughts all the time. And when we get older, we forget that. So we start to realize our story isn't fixed from childhood, right? And it's not based on our experiences, it's based on our interpretation of those experiences, which is basically thought, which is nothing. Now that's really, really, really good news. It's good news because if it's not made of anything, it's not fixed. So thought isn't made of anything. It comes from nowhere. Where does it go? Nowhere. And yet we put so much emphasis on that. And what do you do when you have a thought that you're confused about? What do you tend to do?
Think more.
Right. Analyze it. Think more. Now, does that help? Does it help you?
Not really.
Right?
Slows me down.
Right. Has analyzing your thinking ever helped you?
A little, yeah. In terms of helping me understand how I think. That's the extent.
Right? Does it fundamentally change anything? No. Right? Has anyone had an aha moment in the shower or when they're driving?
Like the light turns on. Ding.
Right? Has anyone had that? Hands up. Right? Everyone's had that. Does that come because you've been really analyzing a problem, or does it come when you're not thinking about it?
When you're coming, you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, and you're just kind of doing whatever, but all of a sudden it pops in your head.
It's like you have an epiphany. Like, look
So this really is good news because it gives you all, and I'm especially talking to the 4 students here, it gives you all a clean slate. Our stories are made from our thinking, but our stories are made from our thoughts. And our thoughts don't come from anywhere, they don't weigh anything, they've got no physicality, and they go back to nowhere. But we tend to hold on to them, right? So you have a thought, I'm not good looking, and you hold on to it. And then that's true, and it's true, and you analyze it, and you think about it, and you look at it, and you think about it more. As opposed to having it come up from nowhere and letting it go back to nowhere. It becomes part of your story. And we do that all through our lives. And this is for you, by the way. It's a gift. And this is a book I read a year ago, and it really is pointing to that. That we have all these stories which are just totally made up. Totally made up, and have nothing to do with reality. Nothing at all. My childhood is the same as it has not changed from 2012 when I came here the first time to today. If you asked me about my childhood in 2012, I would have probably painted a grim picture. Now if you ask me exactly the same childhood, I'll tell you a different story. Both of them are made up. Both of them are interpretations of what happened at that moment. But it was so helpful for me to let go of a story that wasn't serving me. Because when I had the story of my dad was tough on me and he didn't give me the love and affection that I wanted, and that's why I crave it from women, and that's why I'm needy, and right? The analysis, that just kept me stuck. And for years, it kept me stuck. And your stories are keeping you stuck. Because that's all we are. Well, that's what we think we are, I should say. Is this making sense so far? If you've got any questions, just jump in. I'd love this to be an interactive session.
You're making so much sense.
Thank you. I started the day, I said I'd come back to you. I started the day with asking, at the end of this week, what would you like to have happen? What would you like to have change or shift or transform for you?
I would like my communication to become a little bit better in terms of being able to do more open-ended communication, as well as opening with people in general. I don't get nervous when I go up to someone with no one to talk about, and like what they call in the PUA community cold opening. But if I don't have something to talk about, I'll just blank. I can't think of something. I have to have something ready to go.
So can I write that down as better conversations?
But yeah, better conversation skills and communication skills, yes.
And can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
For what purpose?
Everything in general, not only with communicating with women, but communicating with people. I'm very, I think I told the story before, coming from the 4 years in the military. Father was a civil servant, I was a civil servant, very direct and closed off communicator, just because of the nature of the jobs that I did. We can't sit there on an emergency scene and have open-ended communication. We have to do this now, get this now, and we'll deal with everything else later. And just growing up through with all that, and not that it was a bad thing. I didn't have any trauma from it. I think it's just because that was my experience in my formative years, and then going into it as a career, it just kind of led into my personal life, and I want to try to open that up a little bit.
And where do you think not having this is affecting you, or how is it affecting you?
I've been told that I can be very blunt and abrasive, and that I can put some people off. And that's basically it. It's just that I come across sometimes abrasive and blunt.
And do you mind me asking a question that might sound really stupid?
Okay.
Why is that a problem?
I think you just floored me there. Because I would prefer, not that I need it, but I would prefer to be more cordial with people and have more positive interactions with them. Don't need it to get on with my life or anything like that. Been around, 46 years. It hasn't really been a problem, so.
And if you think that shifted, how would that affect your life?
It would improve it. I feel that now that I've got some direction back in my life from my incident with my injury and my career ending, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going?
It would improve your life.
Yes, it would just improve my life in general.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong. There's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
Nobody out there is perfect. Everyone can learn new things. Everyone can just better themselves.
Okay. So my commitment is, so I'm speaking this morning, and then we've got a session tomorrow morning as well. My commitment is, I'm going to help you have a shift in all of these, right? And if I don't, I will commit to being available afterwards as well, after the week. So that's my commitment to everyone. So I was talking about stories. Most people live in an inherited story. Okay? So inherited story. So a lot of our stories, which I've talked about, are just made of thought, right? Our interpretations are often not even your interpretations. Often our stories are ones that we've been told from a parent or from a teacher or an ex-girlfriend or our friends, and we take that on and believe that that is ours. Right? So if your parent, one of your parents or both your parents said, you're never going to amount to anything, right? And you're told that again and again, that becomes your story. Can anyone relate to that? Have you got examples of stories that you see that you've inherited from your parents or your friends?
Nothing comes to mind for some reason.
Not necessarily a story or anything like that, but like I was telling you before, just because of the environment that I grew up in and my formative years, it had a big effect on me. There was nothing negative, I don't think. But I just know that because it happened in my formative years and I was surrounded by it, it rubbed off on me. I became part of that.
Yeah. And again, what happens is this then forms part of your permanent conditioning. Right? We make it real. Right? Like, I'm a former military man, right? That means I am, and you have a bunch of beliefs around that, right? I'm like this, I'm like that. And the thing is, our conditioning is not permanent. And I'm kind of looping around and saying the same thing in a few different ways to really let it land, right? Because, and this is where we come back to psychology and how our understanding of psychology is evolving, right? A lot of psychologists believe our conditioning ended in childhood. So often if you go to a psychologist, they'll go, right, what happened in your childhood? What was your relationship with your parents like? Were you bullied at school? All this stuff, because they feel that is where your conditioning ended. But that's not true. It's why people come to workshops like this, right? If that was true, coming to this workshop would only have a marginal impact on your life because your permanent conditioning is finished in childhood, right? So you can make things marginally better, but you can't go back and change time. However, if your conditioning is just moment to moment, and if your story is evolving moment to moment, then it's much more worthwhile to come to things like this. Because you can totally rewrite your story. You can totally change your life, your circumstances, everything. And you've all probably had examples of that there were things that you thought you couldn't do or was beyond you, and now you've tried it out, and now it's changed. So, how do you create a new story? How do you take the story that you have, maybe one that's not serving you, and we had blind spots on here. Sometimes we don't even know what our story is that's not serving us. That can be the trickiest part. So how do we create a new story? Well, every single person who's going to be talking at the front of the room is an example of the answer. You stay on the path. Right? See, TJ's been coming how many years?
My 9th year teaching at this workshop.
Right? 9th year teaching. And I've seen TJ grow and evolve over that time. Right? And every single person is the same. Lynn, who's upstairs somewhere, she came in 2012 for the first time, and I've seen her evolve and grow and change. And the people that stay on the path, I see grow and evolve. And people who come to one thing and then stop, it has a marginal impact. Because your story is so powerful, right? Maybe, and it's easy to see this with other people. Has anyone got a friend who thinks they're not good looking, but they're quite attractive? You got a friend like this? Has anyone else got a friend that's good looking, but they don't see themselves as attractive? Yeah? You know anyone, right? Have you noticed you can tell this person 1,000,000 times that they're good looking? You can give them real logical reasoning around why they're good looking. That guy checked you out. That girl checked you out. Look at this. You can go for hours. Does that change anything? No. Why not?
They're stuck in that frame.
They're stuck in their story. See, stories are so powerful. They're so all-encompassing. Our mind is literally creating the reality we live in.
Why is it always like that? Like if one person tells you that you're ugly, you believe that. And then if one person tells you that you're not ugly or you're actually beautiful, you're like, no, because that guy told me I was ugly when I was a child or younger. Now I'm just, what you're saying is wrong because that we listen more to the negative than positive.
A lot of people do that. A lot of people do that, and I think it's a function of self-esteem. The higher a person's self-esteem, like if we take Johnny for example, if someone said something negative to him, I don't think it would really bother him, right? If I take myself, I'm not saying things don't bother me, but as my self-esteem has risen over the years, things bother me less that people say. Whereas if I went back years ago and I had very low self-esteem, if someone said something negative to me, I'd really hold on to it. It's another way of saying, as I started to see that my story could change, then why hold on to stories which don't serve me?
But I don't feel like that answered the question. Like if right here and right now we have two people and we say opposite things about you, don't you automatically listen more to the negative?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I used to, but I don't.
How do you not do that anymore?
That's a very good question. How do you not listen to that stories?
On the list, actually.
Yeah, okay. Good. Well, you saved it for a while, but that was a good question. Well, the trick, if there is a trick, isn't to focus on the positive, right? What really helps me is the realization that both negative and positive, that's part of the other person's story. And you only see that for other people when you see it for yourself. And I'm not going to expect you to see that in 5 minutes, but I want to start pointing you to something, right? And it's like with Johnny, there's a lot of repetition over this week and a lot of things support, each other. And the idea is when it's repetitive and it's going in and going in, it starts to break down what you hold to be true. So when we see that our story that we've created is an interpretation, it automatically then follows that so is everyone else's. So if someone says to you, Steve, you're a You're such a horrible, horrible, horrible person. If you don't realize that they are creating that story from their thinking, then that becomes like, oh, that's a real data point telling me about reality, I'm a really bad person. As opposed to, wow, God, this person thinks I'm a twat. That's quite interesting. Why is that? And it can lead to curiosity, as opposed to, oh no, this must be true because someone's really upset about it. In general as well, here's something else for you, Elizabeth. In general, right, when we are upset, and this is a realization I had back in 2012, when you're upset and you're angry, do you get smarter?
Like right when I feel upset,
Yeah.
I'm not very rational at that moment,
No.
but I learn from that later when I'm
Right.
upset anymore.
Right. So if someone is upset with you, this is something to see, and this is something that's really helps me. If someone is upset at me, and people do get upset with me, I know more often than not, they're not thinking very rationally in that moment. It's another consideration when I take on board what people have to say to me. Now, I've had some challenging feedback. I'm not saying don't listen to anything that anyone says to you, but if I know, well, one, it's their interpretation, and two, well, what state of mind are they in? And actually, if they're in a really upset, pissed off state of mind, they're not thinking very rationally and logically right now. That helps me decide how seriously do I take this opinion.
Yeah, of course, but if they're like in a normal state of mind.
Right? Well, if they're in a normal state of mind, what I might do is to, rather than going, oh no, this must be true, because I know it's their interpretation, I want to understand, well, why is that? Why is it that you think X about me? I'm really curious, because there might be something for me to learn in that. But I don't need to hold on to it. And I do this, and we're all intelligent people in this room, right? So someone might say to us, like, let's say you get some feedback, I think you're a rude person. I'm not saying that I'm just picking an example, right? Now, if someone says that to me, Ankush, I think you're very rude. Oh, okay. Why do you think that? Tell me about that. Because I know it's their story that like, whoa, what's that? What's going on there? Because I don't think I'm a rude person. Well, when you came in, you didn't say hello to me, right? Oh, okay, now I get it. Oh, I'm really sorry. You know what? I was so tired. I was actually hallucinating because I was jet lagged and I was trying to just stand up straight and not fall over. I'm really sorry I didn't say hello to you, but that's why I'm sorry you felt that I was rude, right? I don't need to take any of that on about me, that I'm a rude person, I should be different. And normally when you have conversation like that, someone will go, oh, my bad, I didn't know. And that's when you can have much better communication. Yeah, TJ?
Build on that, because I agree completely. And also we got to remember that people have both their own motivation for saying what they say, and someone criticizing you usually have a motive for that, which might be to serve themselves, not necessarily you. What they're saying might not be true. It might just be something they're saying to get what they want. Or they're, the thing that they think might be so fundamentally different than yours that their opinion should not match. If someone tells me that, TJ, I don't like listening to you speak because you speak too quickly, I might say, oh, I'm sorry, I might not be the right speaker for you because I speak quickly when I get engaged to pull people in. I do it by design. I don't need to take that as criticism from someone who speaks a lot slower than me, or from a student who might not connect with my speaking style. I might adapt to them. I don't have to take it as I'm a bad speaker because that person doesn't like it. They might have a motivation for it, which is what Ankush was mentioning when he was asking, why are you, why do you think?
Yeah.
Or their style or their preference or their personal ideals might be so different from yours that you cannot take them on for yourself because that would be taking someone else's values onto yours.
So I'm going to draw this diagram. It's a bell curve. And a bell curve is kind of what's also called as a normal distribution, right? So if you take any event there will be a version of this, right? Now, it might be more skewed towards this way, it might be more skewed towards that way, but any event that happens, people are going to react to it differently, right? So if on this axis it's, number of people, right? Oops. Most people are going to be somewhere in the middle, right? Some people are going to think, so let's say this is negative and this is positive, right? And whatever situation it is, right? People are going to be on the scale somewhere, right? Now, let's look at a really, really good example in the US. Donald Trump, really good example. Some people think he is Satan incarnate. He is the worst president in the world. He's so bad, he justifies being assassinated or something. People really get upset on that end. On the other end, you have people who are such raging fans of his that anything he does cannot be wrong, right? And he's quite a polarizing figure, so the curve might look differently, but the point is, there are going to be different interpretations of the same guy doing the same thing. And this is true for every scenario, for every single thing. Because we are creating our interpretation of that event, we are creating a story based on our thinking. And people overlook that. Even when I tell this to people for the first time, when I share this with people, go, yeah, okay, right, so what? But it's fundamental, because if you realize that is what's going on, that's when you see, right, as you put, Steve, how can I see my blind spots, right? If we go back here, how can I see my blind spots? Well, you can't see your blind spots if you're not open to something, right? If you're not open to seeing something that you don't already know. Now, if you realize your whole reality, your whole experience of life is created via thought, it's created via your thinking. Like right now, there are 6 people in this room listening to me talk, and there are 6 different interpretations of what I'm saying. Some people might be, that's really good. Some people might say, I wish I had more sleep. Some people might, oh, he's boring. But there's still one me talking, and it's all interpretations of what I'm saying. Right? So when you realize that, that's what flows out of that is more curiosity as a side effect. What also happens is your ego diminishes. It has to. Right? Why do a lot of people not realize what their blind spots are? Because they're not open to it. I'm right. This is how I see the world. That's, similar to what you were saying, right? I'm right. I've got to make a decision. This is how it is. Now, if you don't realize that your interpretation is just an interpretation, it's one of numerous, of infinite interpretations of that same event, that you are creating that via your thinking, then you're going to be more close-minded to other opinions, other points of view. Whereas when you realize that, hold on, reality as we experience it, how everyone experiences it, is via their thinking, then you're far more open to not knowing stuff. You're far more open to being curious and learning about people. And the reason why I can say I can help with all of these things is because fundamental to all of these things is understanding your psychology, right? The better you understand your psychology, the easier it is to see your blind spots because you're more open to them, right? The better you understand your psychology, the more you'll be firing on all cylinders because you won't be getting in your way. When you don't understand how your psychology works, you do get in your way. Oh, I'm feeling like I can't be asked to do something, right? Therefore, that means, oh, I don't really enjoy this, therefore I'm not going to do it. And often when I have coaching clients, I'll say to them, have you ever felt in the morning before going to work that you didn't want to go to work? Who's felt that? Who's woken up in the morning, I can't be asked to get out of bed and go to work? Who's felt that, right? Who's then stayed in bed the whole day and not gone to work? Okay, one person, right? And I'm assuming not every time. Despite having that feeling of, oh, I can't be asked, you get up and go to work. Because on some level you realize, I don't need to take that thinking seriously. I don't need to take that feeling seriously right now. The point is that then stops you firing on all cylinders. Right? There's a great concept called good bad days that I came across. Right? Good bad days. And this study found that the top athletes weren't the ones that were training the best all the time. The most successful athletes, or even the most successful business people, or the most successful whatever. It was the people that, when they had a bad day, right, when they had a day when they woke up and go, oh, I can't be asked today, they were the ones that still had a good bad day. They didn't take their thinking too seriously. So, and I really learned from that. So I try and go to the gym regularly. Some days, I can't be bothered. The days that I can't be bothered, I go, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go and do a short workout today. I don't take that thinking so seriously, go, oh, I can't go because I can't be asked to go. I don't take that thinking seriously. Guess what happens a lot of the time? When you're in the gym, once you're there, that thinking's passed. Yeah, go for it, yeah.
She was saying, yeah, I've gone in there and it says, because you didn't want to go there, then you force yourself to go there, you actually feel better, so you have more energy, so you get a little bit of a better workout. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
See, there's clues in this. See, life is giving us clues all the time. And anything that I say, please don't accept it as blind faith, right? But challenge it for yourself. Check it out for yourself. And examples like that are really, really good to show you, oh shit, yeah, that's true. I've had days where I don't really feel like doing anything, but then when I do it, it goes better. What's that about? Well, that kind of is a clue to the fact that your feeling in that moment of, oh, I can't be asked to go to the gym, isn't telling you not to go to the gym. It's just your feeling in the moment based on whatever thinking you have in that particular moment. And that will pass. Right? One of the things on here about staying present and staying grounded, I think that was you, Vic. Staying present and grounded happens as a side effect when you don't hold on to your thinking, when you don't hold on to your story, when you don't overanalyze. You come back to groundedness. Right? Has anyone here got kids? I know you have any. Anyone else got kids? Right? People got nieces and nephews, right? I need to tell it. When your kids, when they can go completely crazy, can they also come back to like as if nothing happened very quickly?
Yeah.
Right? Who else has noticed that about kids?
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
They're very in the moment.
They live in the moment.
They live in the moment because they don't hold on to it. They don't go, crying on the floor and then go, oh my God, everybody saw me having a tantrum. Everyone's looking at me. Oh my God, what are they going to think of me? They don't do all of that. They're not holding on to the thinking. They have their thinking, they feel it, they express it, and then they go to the next thing. And as adults, what do? We hold on to it. Oh my God, I got really drunk last night. What's everyone going to think of me? Oh, I made a fool of myself. We hold on to that thinking, and we do more and more and more thinking, a side effect of which is not being grounded, not being present. So when you're in an interaction, let's say with a woman, and some thinking comes up, the more you engage with that, the less present you're going to be. The reason you engage with it is that looks like the right thing to do in that moment. It looks like that's going to be helpful to you. And what I'm pointing you to is you don't need to do anything. On the level of your thinking, there is always less to do. And we're so used to engaging with our thinking, we're so used to analyzing. I would constantly have a voice in my head. There would be me talking, and then there'd be another voice here.
Only one.
Right? Sometimes more than one. And I never thought that would go away. I generally don't have that voice anymore. At some point years ago, it's just gone. I have thoughts come up, but that constant voice has gone. it's a side effect of, as I started letting go of, like, I didn't need to hold on to that thought and that one, and analyze this and analyze that. It's like a stream, right? You live in a stream of your thinking. So if you let it just flow, it will flow.
But isn't also why we hold on to thoughts a way of learning?
No, that's a really good question. And I thank you for asking that question, because it's not. See, I don't need to hold on to a thought to learn, right? So for years, this is what I would do. I'd go out on a night out, I would drink too much, I would feel shit the next day, and then I would say, oh, I'm never going to drink again, right? Oh, you idiot, why'd you do that for? Beat myself up. Feel bad. Next time I went out, I wanted to feel better. So I would drink again. And the cycle would continue. And everyone, whenever you hear your friends say, oh, I'm never drinking again, everyone laughs because you're like, yeah, right. Now, I never really learned from analyzing my thinking. When I started learning about how the mind works, one day, what didn't even happen to me. A friend of mine was supposed to stay at my house. He went out with some other friends. We'd all gone out together, and I said, look, I'm tired, I'm going to go home. He said, well, I'm staying out. He never came home, right? And we were on a course together. So the next day, he turns up to the course in his same clothes. He stopped on someone's floor, because they went out until 4 a.m. And he came out, he goes, I'm never drinking again. And I learnt from him. And I listened to him, and I never told anyone. I never told him. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to stop drinking. I didn't need to hold on to the thought. I didn't need to analyze it. I thought, every time I drink too much, I end up doing stupid shit like he's done. That just doesn't make sense anymore. No beating myself up, no holding on to the thought, no analyzing it. Oh, it just doesn't make sense. And I stopped drinking for about 2 years. And now when I drink, I will have 1 or 2, and that's it. And I'm not saying that as something you should do. I'm not trying to tell anyone to live their life in a certain way. But the less that I've held on to my thinking, the more I've taken the learning. Because any time I've done something stupid, the immediate second after I've done it, I've taken the learning. I know what I used to do was for hours or days or months, analyze that thinking and have that as another reason why I was not worthy, not confident, not whatever, created a story around it. It was another example of why whatever bullshit I believed about myself was true, as opposed to really taking the learning from it and going, okay, yeah, that doesn't make sense anymore, and carrying on. And kids do this all the time. So if you take a young child, a very young child who's learning to walk, tries to walk, falls over, might cry, might not, it doesn't go, oh man, I fell over, I'm such a stupid kid, the other kid in nursery is walking now and I'm not, what are they going to think? They don't have that. They just take the learning without holding on to anything. And really, the question about learning, and this has been proven, kids learn far quicker than adults. Anything.
Okay, so for you, holding on to a thought and learning from a thought is 2 different things.
Yeah.
But I think I have that
Can you say that again?
intertwined. That for him, holding on to a thought and learning from a thought is 2 different things. But for me, it's the same. I have to hold on to a thought because if I don't, I forget and then I haven't learned anything.
Well, you don't need to remember everything, right? I learned so many things when I grew up. I'm assuming you did too, right? You right? Do you remember every single maths lesson you had, or science lesson, or whatever, right? We don't. So, and it might require a little bit of testing out. I was going to say trust, but it doesn't. It requires a bit of testing out. So when I first got introduced to this, I tested it out for myself. Let me test this out. Let me see how this works for me. And what I found was, it started to work really well, even though it didn't make sense to me at first. And so I started testing a bit more, and I started testing a bit more. And my life just kept improving. My life kept getting better. My mind got quieter. I was more present. I made better decisions. Like, when I first got introduced to this, I mean literally within the first 2 months, I was running out of things to do at work, right? I was always the guy that had too many things on the to-do list. I was in a very target-driven, very, very busy corporate job. And within 2 months, I ran out of, I was like, I have nothing to do. And anything that I did, I just did it really quickly because I wasn't analyzing and overthinking or holding on to my feelings about it. So if I had a feeling like this is boring, okay, that's just a thought, and I got on and did it. My relationships with my parents and my siblings massively improved because, again, I wasn't holding on to my thinking. I remember once my mom came into my room and she said, "Oh, you're 30 years old, why are you not married yet?" And I slammed the door, as I always did, because I was like, oh, she's putting this pressure on me, and she's making me feel bad. I am trying my best, all this stuff. And I slammed the door, and then suddenly it occurred to me, like, whoa, there's a load of anger there. That's not telling me about her. It's not telling me about what she said. Like Johnny says, words have no meaning. I suddenly realized, like, oh, that's thought in the moment. That's my thinking about her, that interpretation. And I've created a story about my mom being a really difficult mom and putting pressure on me. And I opened the door and I went and apologized. I said, "Mom, I'm really sorry. I know you're just trying to look out for me." But I could only see that when I dropped my story. I could only take the learning from that when I dropped my story.
But you would only get angry if part of you agreed with her.
I got angry because I had some thinking about it. I used to get angry and still do on a bunch of different things. But there was some thinking that I had that my mom saying that was putting pressure on me or making me feel uncomfortable or making me feel bad. There was something there. The point of what I'm pointing to is, because this is what we do, right? Well, maybe there's some truth in what she said, and we go into analyzing the thinking. Whereas what I found is just, it doesn't matter.
But you didn't
That's,
analyze, you just reacted.
True, I reacted, but I'm saying afterwards, I didn't analyze it. I used to analyze myself all the time. Why am I like this? Why am I angry? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? But I've also got angry at stuff that people have said that I totally disagree with. Now, on some level, I don't know what you've said. Maybe I agree with them. I don't know. What I'm saying is that when I started to understand better my psychology, when I started to better understand that there was something going on, I'm reacting to that. And the reaction isn't telling me that they're wrong or they're bad, which is what I used to believe. It was like, as if I'd created a dam in the river and the dam just broke. And I got back into flow. And that's the most helpful thing, right? Like, I could have told you in 2012, I could have written pages on my story. I'm like this because of this and that because of that. And it would actually have been very compelling. And I can still tell you and I used to tell the story of people and they'd feel really sorry for me and like, oh, that's so tough. And it reinforced the story. But it wasn't helpful. It really, really wasn't helpful. And dropping that, allowed me to come back to the present moment. You know, who said about overcoming self-doubt, right? Self-doubt is a thought. You cannot doubt yourself without thinking doubtful thinking. Doubtful thoughts. You cannot have that. So you can try and overcome your thinking, or if you realize it's your thinking, I'm having some doubtful thinking right now, and that is coming from nothing and nowhere, and it will go back to nothing and nowhere. It just passes. I have so I've talked a lot about how I've changed, but one thing I should mention is, do I have doubtful thinking still today? Yes, right? Do I sometimes feel anxious and nervous? Yes. Do I have all the same thinking that I had 6.5 years ago? Yes. Not to the same degree, not to the same volume, but I have it. The only difference is by understanding how my mind works better, I don't hold on to stuff that I used to hold on to. Yeah, it doesn't affect me because I understand better what it is, right? At home, we've got this really cool water bottle, right? And it's a red water bottle, and on the water bottle is a penguin, a really cute penguin. And my wife's got one and her sister's got one. They both got the same water bottle. And my niece, she's so cute, when she was like 2 years old or something, 2.5 years old, when she saw the water bottle, she got really scared, right? And there's a really cute video of my brother-in-law going, hey, look at the water bottle. And she's like, ah, no. And she runs to the corner and he throws the water bottle at her. It's really harsh. But he throws the water bottle at her and she's like, no, right? 2 weeks later, he throws the water bottle at her. She doesn't care. She realizes what it is. It's a water bottle with a picture on it. It's not dangerous. It can't hurt her. It's just a water bottle. When she didn't understand what it was, she was having this reaction to it. She's having this uncomfortable feelings, this fear. As soon as she realizes what it is, right, that's gone. Now, if she was an adult and she was scared of something, she might have made a strategy, right? Let me make sure that I'm going to put an alarm on this. Whenever it comes near me, it's going to beep, right? I need to have some like shields next to me to protect myself from this. That's what we do, right? We create all these strategies to protect ourselves or to avoid this or to whatever. But when we realize what things really are, they are thought-generated illusions, then all of that becomes unnecessary. And so a lot of your thinking becomes unnecessary. And so you end up having a quieter mind. And again, I'm going to keep saying the same thing. A lot of what you're looking for, everything that you guys are looking for, is a side effect of that. If you don't realize that, so one really great example of this for men and some women, but a really great example of this is sex, right? There are so many guys who believe that their happiness lies in having sex with women of either number of women or a certain look of women. They believe their happiness is dependent on that. It is not. And the guys who you see are the most successful with women are ones that realize they are happy regardless of whether they have women or not, and they have more women in their lives, right? But if you don't realize that, you can spend years, and people do, finding the best strategies, the best techniques, doing what I did for years. Right? I need to look good, need to smell good, need to talk well. And I did all this stuff. But inside, I was needy because I believed my happiness was dependent on another person. So whenever I was with someone, even if they liked me, they felt that neediness. Johnny yesterday, I heard him kind of say like little quick reads, if you like, of I see this about you, I see this about you, I see this about you. We're always communicating even when we're not talking. Another example I use as an example of that is when you go and buy a car and the salesman walks towards you, you already know what kind of salesman he is before he opens his mouth. This guy's he's gonna sell me any old shit, or actually I know this guy seems okay. Have you experienced that? Right? The point I'm making is that we are always giving off signals of how we perceive the world. We're giving off clues of how we perceive the world all the time. You're right, people can misinterpret that. Yeah. What I'm pointing to is that if you don't understand how the mind works, if you don't understand how it really works, you're going to have misunderstandings. And those misunderstandings are going to be evident to a greater or lesser degree to other people. And that is, again, one of the things over here, right? That's going to get you stuck. That's going to get in your way.
But nobody knows how the mind really works.
Well, I'm proposing that we now do know how the mind works. And and this is not something I've made up. I'm saying there's no consensus in psychology. I'm saying if you go and ask 10 different psychologists in general, at randomly selected, they will all have their different theories of how the mind works. I came across a small group of psychologists who learned from an enlightened man, in essence. A guy had an enlightenment experience back in the 70s, and he saw the connection between spirituality and psychology. And one psychologist went to him, and they had this conversation, and everything that this guy was saying was kind of opposite of what the psychologist was saying. And the psychologist was like, I've got these degrees, I've got all this training, I know the truth, you know, what you're saying is too simplistic. And he went, well, how happy are you? And the psychologist was not happy at all. He went away thinking about what this man had told him, and came back a year later and said, oh my God, my results with my clients are so much better. And then he told another friend of his, a guy called George Pransky. George Pransky went up and met this enlightened man, Sydney Banks, and he started working with couples. Most couples therapists have about a 20% success rate in terms of if you are in a relationship and you go for couples counseling or couples therapy, in general, there's a 20% chance that it will work, i.e. you'll stay together. And people will tell you, well, 20% is better than nothing, and look, we're dealing with very challenging people, and they'll give all sorts of reasons why it's 20%. George and Linda, when they worked with couples, and they still do, but especially in the years ago when they were really working a lot with couples, they had an 80% success rate, 4 times higher than the average psychologist, average therapist. And the 20% of people that didn't stay together, in general, the vast majority of them separated amicably. The results were totally different than virtually every other therapist and psychologist. And when people would meet George, they would go, well, this isn't because you understand anything more about psychology than anyone else, it's just because you're a gifted therapist. And what's happened is over the decades, is more psychologists, more therapists, and now coaches are getting trained in this, and the results are speaking for themselves. Because this is fundamentally behind behavior. I'm going to draw another diagram, if I may, for you. You can work, and this might have been interesting for TJ, but you can work on the level of results, right, or goals. What do you want? I want more women, I want this, I want that. And you can work with someone as a therapist or a coach on that level. And people do, right? Have goals, have big, hairy goals, write them where you can see them, focus on them, concentrate on them. That's one level, right? What some people do is they'll focus on behaviors, right? Well, actually, let's go deeper than that. If you want the goal, if you want a change in your life, what behaviors do you need to demonstrate to get the result? Well, if you want to have more women in your life, then what you need to do is you need to go out clubbing, and you need to go this, and you need to do that. Let's focus on the behaviors, right? Some people will go, well, actually, what you need to do is focus on feelings or state. What state are you in? If you're in a good state, if you're feeling good, right, then you'll take the right behaviors because everyone knows what to do. If you do the right behaviors, you'll get the goal, right? Then you go deeper than that. You go to thought, okay? This is where you get people doing NLP or hypnosis. Well, if you change your thinking, you're going to feel better. If you feel better, you'll do the right behaviors. If you do the right behaviors, you'll get the result you want. Well, what I'm pointing to is deeper than that. I'm pointing to your psychology. Where is thought coming from? How is it created? What is it? Rather than changing it, rather than playing around with it, messing with it, where is it coming from? And so for me, this is the deepest level of change work, because it's beneath all of that. And what happens is, when people start understanding how their psychology works, not only does it change things in the area that you want it to change, but it changes things in unrelated areas, because it's all connected. And Annie, you've done a lot of work on this. I mean, is Is this true for you? Or
I had a 3-day intensive in England about 5 or 6 years ago. And I was all up in my head, and this is why this is why this is why I'm stressed, this is wrong, my life is shit, what am I doing? And then when you go in there, and within, I think it was the first hour, we'd stripped it all back. He just asked me one question, and next question, next question, next question. And when it strips back down, it's that sequence.
is this resonating?
Because each one builds.
Yeah. I think this is, in many ways, this is why Johnny's so successful, because he doesn't talk about women and results. He's not telling you what behaviors necessarily to do. He's not changing your state and doing a Tony Robbins thing and pumping you up, right? And he's not even getting you to change your thinking, although he does talk a lot about the logic of your thinking. And he's kind of operating around here, which is why his work is so powerful, because it's not about changing your thinking, but it's like, oh, I didn't realize that is that, and oh, that's true, I didn't realize that before. It's on a very deep level, fundamental operating model, he calls it, which then everything else is built on. And you can do this for not just women. This is across the board. We talked a little bit about business yesterday, right? If you fundamentally believe that making more money is going to make you happier, or make you more powerful, or feel more, that's a fundamental misunderstanding. The mind does not work that way, right? You're either going to fail, or if you succeed, it will be a hollow success, because you won't get the feelings you're looking for. And what I'm not saying is, therefore, don't be successful, don't have success in the world. I'm saying, when you understand how the mind works, you're free. Because if you realize, oh, I'm not going to be any happier or any less happy, whether I make more money or not, then you have less on it, then you're really free to create whatever business you want. And you're less needy. And again, you can interchange business with women, you change it with anything. So I've been speaking for about an hour and a bit, hour and a half. I think I've got about 3 hours. So what I want to do, and I know this is a bit unusual and it's been a bit hectic and it will get worse probably the rest of this week, but it's really nice and quiet and I like taking the morning slot for this reason. I would really love you guys to go out. I don't know how cold it is outside, but just go and spend 10 minutes on your own. Not on your phone, right? Not thinking, just be for the next 10, 15 minutes on your own. And I do this exercise on my events that I run in the UK. And it's something that no one normally does, right? And especially there's a lot of download going on this week. There's a lot of concepts being introduced. So, yeah, go back to your room, but don't jump on your phone or your computer or anything else, and just spend 15 minutes on your own without anyone else, and then come back here. Thank you.